This video contains content that may be confronting.
The Northern Territory coroner has handed down her findings and recommendations following a historic inquest into family and domestic violence, describing the issue as a plague and a horror. In her address, the coroner expressed the urgency of the situation.
In the Territory, the rates of reported domestic violence are more than 3 times the national average, and less than 10% of all incidents of domestic violence are ever reported to the police. Not only is the violence more relentless in the Territory, it is more vicious. More weapons are used, and the injuries inflicted on victims result in high rates of hospitalisation. Domestic and family violence is present in our homes, on our streets, in our shopping centres and parks, on our beaches and at our bus stops. It is happening right now. Right now, 000 calls are being made and first responders in police cars and ambulances are being dispatched. Statistics are numbers, but the people they count are not. Those people include the 4 women whose lives and deaths were examined in these inquests. All of these women were daughters and sisters and aunties, and some of them were mothers. Together, their stories help us understand the nature of the problem.
Reporter Melissa McKay has been covering the inquiry, and she joins us now from Alice Springs Local Court. Hi there, Mel. So 35 recommendations from the coroner. Which were the main ones?
Hi, Ros. Well, the overwhelming feeling from the coroner was simply calling for a massive increase in the funding for the Northern Territory's domestic, family and sexual violence sector. Overwhelmingly, throughout the evidence, the coroner heard that the sector is underfunded and overwhelmed with demand. So she called for a fully funding, for the government to fully fund the ICRO, which was a working group that was established in the Northern Territory to really provide recommendations to the government about how to tackle this domestic violence crisis, or the epidemic, as the coroner called it, that is gripping the Northern Territory. She also called for a peak body to be established in the Northern Territory. The NT is the only jurisdiction in the country that doesn't have a peak body representing the domestic, family and sexual violence sector. So she wants to see someone able to advocate for the sector on that national level, calling for the boost to funding that is so needed here in the NT. She said, we've also seen recommendations in the police and health department training space. The coroner has called for both the police and the health departments to really commit to this new training program that is being rolled out, where police recruits at the moment are being spoken to by experts in the domestic violence field to really change the way that they approach responding to domestic violence situations. So she's called for that training to continue and to be expanded. We've also seen recommendations in the prevention and education space when it comes to young people, and particularly men and boys. The coroner really calling for a focus on the education of respectful relationships, and also the rehabilitation of those who do choose to use violence to try and break that cycle that she said is often intergenerational, affecting young children who grow up witnessing and experiencing domestic violence. So a lot of recommendations there. The coroner has handed down a very significant report that this sector will no doubt need time to go through.
So the coroner said that many of her recommendations, Mel, were not radical. What does she mean by that?
Yeah, the coroner really reiterated that a lot of the recommendations that she has made today are really building on the work that is already being done by the domestic and family violence sector, particularly in the Northern Territory. But she really reiterated the fact that a lot of the evidence that we heard throughout this inquiry are issues that have been raised previously. We've seen coronial inquests before, we've seen royal commissions into this issue across the country before. And so the coroner really saying there that a lot of what she is recommending is not radical. It's something that people have been calling for quite some time. And she got quite emotional on the bench there, thanking the hard-working domestic and family violence sector here in the Northern Territory for the work that they do in trying to protect particularly women and children.
Elisabeth Armitage also called on men to take responsibility for their violence. What did she say?
Yeah, the coroner really focused towards the end there on the people who choose to use violence. She said that there is really no way to turn this around until the people who choose to use violence stop using violence. And so we've heard several times throughout this inquiry that all of these domestic violence killings were preventable, that the use of violence is a choice. And so the coroner really asking those who do use violence against their loved ones to think about the choices that they're making. And that's why she sort of focuses there on that education and prevention space as well. We can take a listen to a little bit of what she had to say there.
If there is to be a solution to this problem, it lies with the men who are choosing to use violence. They must stop blaming someone else, take responsibility and change their attitudes and behaviours. For each man, making those changes might be quite radical, but it's certainly not radical to understand that they will need longer-term help, support and education to make those changes and to make them stick long-term. There is a paucity of work being done with men, but we know the kind of work that needs to be done.
So the coroner has handed down a really significant report today. Ros, this is the result of a 1.5 year long investigation into the Northern Territory's domestic violence sector. Over the course of that time, the coroner heard from 95 witnesses and she saw statements from countless more people. So quite a significant body of work being handed down today. But the coroner at the end there also announced that she will be holding another very similar inquiry next year, expected to be held in August of next year, looking at the deaths that have continued to occur since this inquiry began. We know that just in the past 5 months, another 8 people have been killed in alleged domestic violence circumstances. So the coroner will again shine a spotlight on the Northern Territory's domestic violence sector in 2025. And she said there that it will be interesting to see which of the recommendations that she has made today, how they're progressing by that point in August of next year.
Melissa, thank you. And you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service on 1800 RESPECT, and dedicated support for First Nations people is available from 13 Yarn.